So, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for this opportunity to present you again the new LOI concept. I made a presentation last year, and I remember that some of you were somehow skeptical about this new concept. So the idea of today is to represent again some of the changes, so to refresh you regarding the new LOI concept, but then I would like also to provide you some feedback regarding the advanced application phase that we launched in 2016. So far, we have more than 20 companies joining this advanced application phase and more than 100 projects. So we are already in position to give you some feedback and somehow to reassure you regarding the practicability of this new concept. So this is our journey. One note. All the explanation that I will give you today refers to applications for a new TC, for an STC, for a major change, or for a major repair. Application for ETSO or minor changes or minor repairs are not covered by this presentation. Okay, the main principle of LOI. What is LOI? We have a definition which will be introduced in the part 21. This is the selection of the compliance demonstration activities and data that the agency will investigate and the depth of this investigation during the certification process. So this definition is new, but the concept is not new. And if we consider the two pillars of our certification process, of our certification domain, meaning that the certification project and the DOA oversight, of course, the LOI affect only the certification projects. Nevertheless, these two pillars are interrelated, and the result of our level of involvement can affect the next DOA audit, and the result of the audits can affect the LOI for future projects. But this is true today, and this will remain true tomorrow. Nothing is changing in this respect. Why then a new LOI concept? The reason for this is that today, the Part 21 does not provide any indication regarding the way the agency should determine its level of involvement. There is nothing in the MC nor in the GM regarding the way the agency should determine its level of involvement. It is already implicitly recognized that the agency cannot be involved in the 100% of the activities related to demonstration of compliance, but there are no guidance. Therefore, there is nothing regarding the safety management principle. This is the main reason why we started working on this new LOI concept. And then, since we have to introduce this concept, we wanted to introduce a concept based on the risk. This is why I will show you how we intend the risk in the frame of the certification process. We want to focus our resources on the aspects of the certification which poses the highest risks. This does not mean that we want to increase our level of involvement nor decrease. The objective is really to concentrate ourselves on those aspects of the certification process which poses the highest risk. And then we want also to provide a more transparent process for the applicant in order to have even a better predictability. Of course, again, we cannot provide 100% of predictability. There are always some specificities in each project. Then each project needs to be considered on its own, but we can have now more predictability than in the past. We want to offer an equal treatment to all our applicants. And also for the agency, we may have a better controlled process with this new concept in place. Last but not least, this is the first step to introduce into Part 21 the new standards set by ICAO Annex 19. So this is just the first step. Then there is another rulemaking process to cover all the other aspects of Part 21. But this is the first step to introduce the principle of ICAO Annex 19 into Part 21. As I said already, this is somehow a duplication of the presentation I made last year. I somehow redrafted it, and I tried to show in a different way. So let's start with the practical changes to the certification process. So if we show these are the main steps of each certification process. So we start with an application, then we establish a certification basis, a certification program, and then the compliance demonstration activities can start. And once everything is finished, we have the compliance declaration. So now, if we consider the main step, we have a new item introduced by the new LOI concept. The new item is the definition of the CDIs, which are pieces of the certification program. We will see this in a slide later on. And then for each CDI, we have to determine our level of involvement. So the applicant has to make a proposal and the agency has to determine the level of involvement. We will see how does it work. So this is the new element on the certification process. Then if we focus on the responsibilities of the applicant and of the agency, we have that the new points are shown in green. So the new Part 21 will impose that the application is complemented by a first version of the certification program. Some applicants were already working in this way, but this is now this will become a new requirement. Then the new Part 21 will impose that the applicant will make a proposal for the certification basis. And as it was already today, the agency will have to establish and notify the certification basis. Then the applicant has to provide a certification program, like today. But on top of that, he has to make a proposal of the level of involvement of the agency. This is the new aspect which has been introduced in the Part 21. And this assessment is to be made at CDI level. So we will see what does it mean. Then the agency has to accept the certification program and to determine and notify the level of involvement. Of course, this activity will be made on the basis of the proposal for LOI received from the applicant. Then the process continues as usual. So the applicant has to demonstrate and verify compliance, and the agency will verify the compliance of the retained items. Then there is a new step. There is a new obligation for the applicant to inform the agency in case of difficulties encountered during the compliance verification. This is something new. However, many organizations are already working in this way today. This is just new because it's new in the Part 21. There is a new point, 21.820, within the 21.820. And then the agency has the possibility to adjust its level of involvement on the basis of this information or on the basis of other information collected during the compliance verification. This adjustment of LOI can be in both ways, can be as an increase or a decrease. In any case, if the agency decides to adjust the LOI during the compliance verification, the agency has to explain why this has been made. Then the process continues as today without any other changes. So these are the main aspects which are new. And now we will focus on the CDI and on the risk assessment to show how the applicant should make a proposal for CDI and LOI at CDI level. It is to be noted, by the way, that the LOI is proposed as part of the certification program. So this is a complement, just to complement the certification program. And the determination of LOI can be made by the agency only after the technical familiarization phase. So it cannot be done at the beginning. We need to have to have a good basis of the certification program in order to make to determine our level of involvement. Yeah, theoretically, the compliance demonstration should start only after the LOI determination. This is mainly in case of testing expected, because if a test is expected, it's of high importance that the agency tells to the applicant whether it wants to be involved, yes or not. Because if you start a test before you know the level LOI, there is a risk that you have to repeat it. Then the CDI. This is a new entry for part 21. And let's see what does it mean CDI. CDI is the acronym for Compliance Demonstration Item. And according to the text that we have introduced in part 21, the risk assessment has to be made at compliance demonstration item level. The CDI then is a meaningful grouping of compliance demonstration activities and data taken from the certification program. This is the definition that we introduced. On a practical standpoint, you have your certification program with your requirement and your means of compliance. And what you have to do, you have to decide how to group these means of compliance, these activities which are within your certification program into CDI. Because in this way, you will have a meaningful subject on which you can perform your risk assessment. In some cases, we have seen that the whole project can be considered as a CDI if it is not too complex and if there are only few requirements. You don't need to break down into CDIs. You can. We have seen during this advanced application phase that some applicants, in some cases, decided to use only one CDI covering the whole certification project. And, but we have also seen that some other applicants decided to consider each element of the certification program as a CDI. And we have also accepted this approach. So these are the two opposite. Of course, we expect that the majority of the cases will be in the middle. So in many cases, you need to really make some grouping in order to have, to simplify the risk assessment process. So the CDI is essentially an element introduced to simplify the risk assessment of your project. Without it, we would have the only options to work at project level or at single individual element level, which can be too onerous, for example, if you have a new TC, but even if you have a large STC, it will become quite impracticable. Then it is clear that the risk assessment is to be done at CDI level. Now let's see what do we mean with risk assessment. So when we speak about the risk, if you go to the dictionary, the dictionary tells you that the risk is the probability of an occurrence of an unwanted event multiplied by the consequence of that event. So there are two elements in the risk. One is the likelihood of an unwanted occurrence, and the other element is the impact of that occurrence. This is what the dictionary tells you. Now we transposed this concept within the certification process. And then for us, the risk becomes the likelihood of an identified non-compliance with a part of a certification basis in combination with its potential impact on product safety or environmental protection. So again, there are two elements. One element is the likelihood of unidentified non-compliance with a part of the certification basis. This is our hazard. And the second element is the potential impact of this hazard on the product safety or environmental protection. According to the Part 21, to the new Part 21, the future Part 21, the risk is to be determined using at least the following elements. This at least at the moment is not used. So these are the four elements that we have to consider. So the four elements are novelty, complexity, DOA performance, and criticality. This is what the Part 21 will tell you. And then let's see how this element works together. So the first three, novelty, complexity, and DOA performance, will contribute to the likelihood of the unidentified non-compliance with the certification basis. So these three criteria will be contributing to the first element of the risk, while the criticality, which is the potential impact on product safety or environmental protection, constitute the second element of the risk. So these two elements together provides you a risk classification according to the new Part 21. The new Part 21 does not tell you anything else. It does not tell you how the novelty is to be determined or complexity and so on. And the new Part 21 does not even tell you how this likelihood and impact of on product safety or environmental protection is working together. So in order to find additional guidance on these elements, we have to look into the MCGM to Part 21 and to the certification memorandum on LOI that we published last year in January. In the next slide, then, I will show you what is in these documents. So novelty. According to our certification memorandum on LOI and according to the MC that we published in the MPA 2017-20 consulted last year, the novelty is classified as a binary element. So one CDI can be either novel or not novel. We don't have any intermediate possibility, only black and white. And then the novelty can refer to several aspects. This is really a short list, but if you go to the guidance, you will see a very detailed description of what we mean with new technology, operation. So the novelty can be driven by technology, operation, installation, requirements, new requirements, use of means of compliance. So, but again, this is just a quick summary of what is in the guidance. And then novel can be for the applicant or for the agency. If, I think it's quite rare, but if an applicant has already a good experience on something which is new for the agency, then it has to consider this CDI as novel, also if he has already some experience. With the criteria of novelty, we have the possibility to change the criteria in the course of the years, because something which is novel today can become no longer novel in the future if you continue working on this kind of technology or operation and so on. And in the same way, if you have an experience on that technology, but which is older than I don't know, which is very old, like 10 years, 15 years old, then you should consider then this technology novel again, because probably you don't have. So the time frame between the last time that you use this technology and the current time is to be considered. Then the complexity. For the complexity, we have the same approach. So a CDI can be complex or non-complex. We don't have any intermediate level. The complexity can be driven, again, by the design, by the technology or the associated manufacturing process, by the compliance demonstration, by the interpretation of the result of compliance demonstration. For example, when you have subjective evaluations to be done on the result of the demonstration of compliance. When there are interfaces with other CDIs, or with other requirements. In these cases, the CDI should be considered as complex, and for the complexity, we don't see, at least in the short term, the possibility that something which is complex today will become no longer complex tomorrow. So the complexity is more a fixed criteria. Then the third element of the likelihood of an identified non-compliance is the DOA performance. In this case, the rating can be on 3 levels. The first one is low or unknown, for example, for a new organization. Then medium or high. The applicant does not have to make any specific evaluation on this, because the DOA performance is provided by the agency. And normally it is provided at panel level if we have enough information. So in this slide you see 2 indicators, the blue one and the red one. The blue one is, for example, is the overall indicator of the DOA performance, and the red one is the indicator of a specific panel. For example, in this screenshot is the panel 4 of one DOA. If your CDI refers to the panel 4, you have to consider the information provided by the red indicator. Okay? So in general, the red indicator is the indicator to be considered when you have to determine the DOA performance for your CDI. In case the red indicator is not available, because there can be that for some panel we don't have enough data, then you can consider the overall indicator of your DOA. This is what the guidance tells you in the MCGM 2 Part 21. So this information is given by the agency. Of course, in case of specific circumstances, the applicant can decide to propose some differences if they are really justified on the DOA performance. Otherwise, this information is an input for you. Then the last point is the criticality. The criticality is binary. One CDI can be critical or non-critical. We don't see any intermediate possibilities. We provide some guidance on the certification memorandum on LOI and MC 2 Part 21 regarding what do we mean with criticality. Most of the criteria are derived from the GM21A91, but there are also additional criteria. For example, appreciable effect on human-machine interface. It's already something leading to critical CDI and other aspects. When the criticality cannot be determined at the early stage, it can be estimated using a conservative approach and then adjusted later on. I'm quite quick on this point because I explained this last year, and now I want to focus more on the feedback that we had during the advanced application phase. We have these 4 criteria, and now let's see how these 4 criteria work together. This slide is a repetition of what we have already seen before. Part 21 gives you the criteria, but does not tell you how these 4 criteria can work together. So now, what I will show you is how they work together. And to see this, we have to open the certification memo on LOI and MCGM 2 Part 21. So in these documents, we find 2 matrices, which tells you how the criteria works together. The first matrix is the matrix used to determine the likelihood of the unidentified non-compliance with the certification basis. In this matrix, we enter with, in the vertical axis, with information related to novelty and complexity. So we reduced a little bit the matrix in 3 columns to simplify it. So in the first column in the left, you have a CDI which is not novel and not complex. So if this is your case, you enter in that column. Or if your CDI contains some elements of novelty but not of complexity and vice versa, you will enter in the middle column. And in case your CDI contains both elements of novelty and complexity, you have to enter on the right column. Then the DOA performance is in the horizontal axis. So we have 3 possibilities, high, medium, and low. And the combination of this information provides you one level of likelihood, from the very low to the high. So very low, low, medium, and high. There are 4 levels possible. With this information, we go to the next matrix, in which the likelihood is in combination with the criticality. So as we've seen before, we have only 2 possibilities for criticality, meaning critical or non-critical. And then in this second matrix, you will have the possibility to see which is the risk class of your CDI, from risk class 1 to risk class 4. These are the 4 classes identified by the agency. Then what does it mean, risk class 1 or 4? According to the information that we provided in the guidance, risk class 1 means that for that CDI, there will be no more involvement of the agency. So no element should be retained by the agency within that CDI. If the CDI has a risk class 2, there will be few elements, meaning document or in very rare case, some activities which can be retained by the agency, but the majority, the vast majority of the document, data, and activities contained in that CDI should not be retained by the agency. Then, for the risk class 3 and 4, there will be more and more involvement of the agency. We don't have any fixed value, and even risk class 4 does not mean that the agency will be involved in all the activities or document or data contained by that CDI, but as a measure of involvement, so risk class 3 and 4 means that there is more and more involvement of the agency. Some additional information regarding what do we expect to see in these cases is provided by the attachments of the certification memo on LOI. This is a shortcut from the attachment 6 of this certification memo on LOI, which for each risk class provides those elements which are typically expected to be retained by the agency considering, depending on the risk class. But this is just an, how to say, an initial guidance. We don't want to follow this very, very strictly because we have to consider on a case by case which are the elements which contains the aspects of novelty, complexity, and criticality within the CDI. So this is to be considered as a guidance by the applicant, and this is an additional information. So we have one attachment for each panel, and in this attachment we have this additional information. In this slide, some additional information just to tell you that if an element is retained by the agency, you should expect from the agency a feedback on this element, which can be a comment on a technical objection, in some cases an approval, depending on which are the element retained within the CDI. Compliance data does not mean compliance document. We have seen that in some cases we are really interested on some information which are contained in a big document. Then we retain only this information. So if a document has 1,000 pages, but the description which interests to us is only on 20 pages, we can tell you, okay, we want to retain this data, this information, so not all the document. So you should not expect comments on all the document, but only on the element which is significant for the risk assessment. This is particularly true for the big document. It remains true that the agency has the possibility to ask other documents for information only. This is not related to the LOI. It is just because in some cases, in order to have a complete picture, we need to have also some additional information. But in that case, you should not expect any feedback regarding this document. And then this is the last slide, just to summarize the activities to be performed according to the new LOI concept. So once you have determined your CDIs, for each CDI, you have to perform an assessment of the likelihood of the unidentified non-compliance with the certification basis. This assessment is made considering 3 criteria: the novelty, the complexity, and the DOA performance. And then the second step is that the applicant has to determine the criticality of the CDI. In this way, using the 2 matrices that we have seen before, a risk class can be determined. Once this step is done, the last step for the applicant is to make a proposal of documents, data, or activities to be retained by the agency for each CDI which falls into risk class 2, 3, and 4. Because if it is in risk class 1, we don't expect any proposal. And then for the agency, the activity will be to determine our level of involvement on the basis of this proposal received by the applicant. On the bottom, you see specific guidance for all these steps are provided in the certification memorandum LOI and in the MC 21B100A, 21A15B6. This applies to all applications for a new TC, for an STC, for a major change or a major repair. So if you want to make a break.
Yes. So not surprisingly, we have lots of questions.
Yeah.
You can go to Franz Redak here. So first question, is there any introduction of time frame considerations in the LOI for the certification plan, certification program assessment from EASA?
No, in the guidance material MC or Part 21, you will not see any statement, any statement for this. But internally, we are trying to speed up this process. Yeah, we have an internal input to speed up this. If you expect to see something at the MC level, you will not find anything there. But again, this is a commitment that we want to take, and we have already taken. So we are monitoring our performance in this respect. It's true that when we receive complete proposals and mature proposal, this will facilitate our determination of level of involvement. This is for sure it's obvious, but yeah. We know that we have to ensure a good performance in this frame, and we have an internal input to do that, but that's all. Thank you.
So we have a question from Mr. Federico Sanavio. Is he in the Airbus room or in the Boeing room? Okay, perhaps Angela, you can give him a microphone because he's mentioning privilege, which I'm not sure. It's something I could explain myself better than he does.
Hello, my name is Federico Sanavio from Superjet International. The question was related to the fact that the DOA already has the privilege of submitting compliance document for major changes or STC without further involvement, subject to EASA verification when they requires it. So maybe it was explained, but it's not very clear how this is related to the CDI concept, especially on small projects, because I understand and I see this is really related to a big project like a new aircraft or a big change. But if you imagine small modification or STC, it's really difficult to understand the logic between a CDI and then going into the detail of compliance document to understand when the EASA wants to retain something and not.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry. So the question was if there is a direct impact on the new Part 21 on the requirement, on the privilege, sorry.
I'm not sure. Okay, in any case, if we have an application, for any application, for an STC, for a major change, a major repair, or a new TC, any application to the agency has to be complemented by a risk assessment. So it doesn't matter whether it is small or big. If it is a major change or an STC, it has to be complemented with this risk assessment and LOI proposal. As I already said, during this advanced application phase, we have seen that for simple projects, the whole certification project was considered as a CDI. So de facto, there was no breakdown of the certification program into CDIs. The whole certification program was considered as a CDI, and then the whole project was assessed using these criteria of the novelty, complexity, DOA performance, and criticality, and the applicant made an evaluation. We have seen also one case where only one small element of that project was retained. So this is, the new Part 21 does not allow any escape. If we have an application, this is the rule. Only minor changes and minor repairs have a different approach.
Okay, we have one last question before we have to go to the rest of the presentation. Again, we have received a lot of questions. Be sure we will all consider all of those and answer all of those in due time. So from our colleague from Austro Control, Sarah Slew, trying not to deform his question because it's a little bit provocative. So CDI and LOI definition means additional tasks and possibly burden for the involved stakeholders. So what is the expected benefit for the STC holder to use LOI process?
Okay, it's true that it is an additional step and additional burden. This is out of question. It is known. However, we have seen that once the applicant becomes familiar with this new concept, this amount of additional effort is really limited. We have also seen that some applicants decided to apply the new LOI concept on each and any application already today, even if it is not mandatory. And this is a good signal of the feasibility of this. What are the benefits? I think personally that it will allow the applicant to think about the aspects of novelty, complexity, and criticality of the project, to identify where he has to put additional effort, additional information, additional attention. And I think it is also good that the applicant then have a clear notification in due time. Actually, our goal is to notify our level of involvement within 4 weeks. I cannot tell you that this is true for each and any application, but this is our goal. So the positive aspect can be that the applicant knows which is the level of involvement of the agency in a short time frame. Additionally, I see another benefit. Today we don't speak about it, but you know that the new Part 21 will introduce a new privilege, the privilege to approve what we call the certain major changes, a certain major repair, and certain STC. It is a different approach, but the concept is the same. It is a privilege granted on a risk-based approach. And the risk is determined using the same criteria. So once an applicant becomes familiar with these criteria and knows where he has good performance, good understanding of novelty, complexity, and so on, then he has the possibility to enlarge his privilege and enlarge the scope of the new privilege, because you can get the new privilege with the possibility to approve only some group of changes, repairs, or STC. And this group can be extended once you have more familiarity with the technology and with that kind of changes. So overall, I admit that there is an additional effort, but I see also that I see in the medium long term that there will be some benefit. This is what we hope. Other questions, or we go ahead?
Perhaps just a comment that LOI was not an initiative from EASA which was based on thin air. We actually got a lot of feedback from the industry in the past, which has brought us to define this system. So I think this is one of the benefits is that it's answering expectations from the industry.
Yeah, actually, this element and the compliance with ICAO Annex 19, the element of transparency was in my previous slide, so I thought this was already given. But on top of that, I see also some practical aspects which can be interesting. Then the overall roadmap. The rulemaking task related to the new LOI concept started many years ago. I was not in the agency at that time, 2013, and we had an MPA published in June 2015, but the first major milestone was reached in May 2016 with the opinion 07/2016, which contains the proposal made by the agency for changes to Part 21. This opinion took the name from this new LOI concept, but however, this contains much more than simply the new LOI concept. In this slide, you see also the link to retrieve the document. Then other important milestones were reached in January 2017 with the publication of the certification memorandum on LOI for consultation. This is still a draft, of course. And then in December 2017 with the publication of the MPA 2017-20, which contains all the MCGM to Part 21, which are related to the opinion 07/2016. Also here you see the link. Now, I would like to give you an overview about what is going on in the context of new Part 21 approval and certification memorandum LOI publication and MCGM to publication. So the opinion was published in 2016. It was discussed 2 times by the EASA committee, and then it went through the Commission inter-service consultation. We got many comments in this phase, but we closed all of them. So what? So now the next steps would be that the text of the Part 21 should be approved by the Commission and then to the Parliament and then published. But in the meantime, in the meantime, the new basic regulation will be approved. So currently, it is quite difficult to determine when the new Part 21 will be published, because with the new basic regulation, the process to approve changes to Part 21 will be amended, will be changed. So the Part 21 will become, thank you, it will become a delegated act, and for this process, we believe that a few months will be sufficient, but we don't know exactly how much time will take this approval process. And then the Part 21 has to be translated into the languages of the European Union before publication in the official journal. So we can just make a forecast. In the more optimistic scenario, the most optimistic scenario, the Part 21 can be published within the end of the 2018, end of the year, so somewhere in November, December. This is the more optimistic scenario. Otherwise, it will be published probably in the first part of 2019. This publication will, with the publication, we will start with a transition period of 9 months. I think this was already discussed by Markus Gornemann before, during which the applicants are not mandated to use the new LOI concept or to comply with the requirement. But this period is to be used to implement the related procedures within the DOA handbooks. And then after the transition period of the 9 months, the new Part 21 will become mandatory. The compliance with the new Part 21 will become mandatory for everybody. In the meantime, we published already an MPA in 2017, end of the year. This MPA contained about 67 MCGM to Part 21, which were affected by the new Part 21. This MPA has been consulted. We got about 270 comments, and we closed the review of all of them. Now we are preparing another MPA, which will contain MCGM which are affected by the changes introduced during the Commission inter-service consultation. So the text of the opinion will be somewhere significantly different from the text of the new Part 21. From a technical standpoint, I would say that there are no significant differences, but the text is different, and these differences requires some adjustment or explanations at MCGM level. So we plan to publish about more or less 15 amended or new MCGM within the, in another MPA, which will be published within the end of this year. And then there will be a decision which will contain all the MCGM contained in the first MPA and in the second one. And this decision is expected to be published right after the entry into force of the Part 21. So basically on the first part of 2019, the first months, if the Part 21 is published within December, or a little bit later if it is published later. I mentioned already a lot of time the certification memorandum on LOI. This certification memorandum will also be published, but this will be published right after the entry into force of the Part 21. And this certification memorandum contains all the attachments which are specific for EASA panel, and these information are not transferred in the MC 21B100. So this certification memorandum will still contain information which are useful for the LOI determination. Okay, the issue 3 of this certification memorandum is aligned with MPA. The advanced application phase will continue till the end of the transition period. So if you are interested to join this experience, you are more than welcome. And we are trying to use all the lessons learned that we are gathering to improve the guidance. There are no, the whole process is the same, is not changing, but we have seen that some improvement have been made thanks to this advanced application phase. Now, the advanced application. The reason of this is to ensure that we have a smooth implementation of the new LOI concept. We want to be sure that once the new Part 21 will be in place, we as an agency will be ready, and the applicant will also be ready. Additionally, we want to see whether we can improve our guidance, so we want to test it in a flexible environment, like the advanced application environment. We want to identify areas which are not mature, but also we want to identify areas which are already mature. This is, I think, is a good opportunity for both, for the applicants and for the agency to test this new concept before it becomes mandatory for everybody. And we have seen that many organizations are now joining this advanced application phase, also many STC holders. More or less, we have a representative from all the area of the industry, from the large manufacturers to general aviation, STC holders, engine manufacturers, and so on. Then, some statistic. This statistic is based on the first 54 pilot projects, which are those already closed. We have now more than 100, but I didn't consider the others because they were not yet closed, so the LOI can still be adjusted. So from these 54 pilot projects, we have 420 CDIs. So as an average, we have seen that for each project, we have about 8 CDIs. So the risk assessment is to be repeated 8 times. But then, if we split this information and we focus on the 2 approaches that I described already, we have seen that some applicants decided that they don't group the elements of the certification program into CDIs. So each element of the certification program is assessed individually. In this case, the average of CDIs, let's call it this way, is about 50. While for the applicants that makes this grouping, or for small projects that also consider the whole project as a CDI, we see that the average of CDI is less than 4. These are just statistic number. Of course, if we have a new TC, that will change a lot, this number. These projects were all major changes or STC. But I think it is already an indication of what you can expect. And the idea of the CDI is really that we introduced the CDI to reduce the number of time that the applicant has to repeat the risk assessment. So without CDI, the number of assessment would have been higher, much higher. And then regarding the criteria that we have identified. For the novelty, we have seen that more than 90% of the CDIs were not novel for the applicant, while only 8.4% were novel. The complexity, less than 20% of the CDIs were classified as complex. When I say was classified, it means that the applicant made a proposal and the agency agreed with this proposal or, however, determined a level of involvement. So these are final data. So the complexity is less than 20% of CDIs, and the criticality is less than 27%. Now, regarding the risk class, we have seen that for almost 70% of the CDIs, the risk class was 1. This means that in this risk class, there were no involvement of the agency. So CDIs falling in this risk class were not retained by the agency. Then 18% on risk class 2, 9% on risk class 3, and 5% on risk class 4. As an overall, we have seen that the overall level of involvement of the agency is more or less unchanged. We have seen a slight, very slight decrease of agency involvement, but so this is what we have seen so far. These are the statistics. Lesson learned. First of all, again, we want to thank the volunteering companies because we had the possibility to test our guidance and to improve the guidance on the basis of the result of the advanced application. And then we had also many internal discussions within the agency to improve the guidance because this advanced application allowed us to work already with this material. And this was a very good opportunity for us to check whether we were happy, and when we were not happy, we had the possibility to improve the guidance. We have, on a monthly basis, a working group to discuss the result of this advanced application. We made more than 20 I don't remember the exact number, but more than 20 meetings. So it's something which is really taken seriously by the agency. And then the new LOI concept has also been presented to our partners, and it was more or less accepted without any major concern. So some significant outcomes. So far, we have seen that the new process proved to be practicable. So we haven't seen any unreasonable LOI proposal. So sometimes we corrected the proposal received by the applicant, but nothing really unworkable. And we have seen that the risk classes were coherent with expectations. Again, we had some cases where the risk classes were not coherent, but in these cases we have investigated whether there was a lack in the guidance or it was a specific issue within the project. So I would say that there were some additional guidance which were needed and we added. But in general, I would say that today the risk classes are coherent with expectation. No significant delays in the certification of the pilot projects. Yeah, as I said, the first one can be really an issue because when the applicant starts with this new concept, he has to make up their mind and to put some effort in the preparation of the proposal. But as soon as the applicant is a little bit familiar with the new concept, we have seen that there is no significant delay in the certification project. We have seen many different types of CDI proposed. We have seen some applicants working at the ASA panel, some applicants at requirement level, some other at ATA level. We have seen that there are many possibilities, but all of them have been so far accepted because the idea is that this CDI is only to allow the applicant to perform a risk assessment. So we are not really commenting the approach selected by the applicant, provided that there is still something meaningful. So if an applicant merges something which is completely meaningful, then we can make a comment. But so far we haven't seen this. We have seen that this testing phase is attracting more companies. And we have also seen that at least 5 companies are already applying a new LOI concept on each and any project. So this is their decision. And so this is just to say that once you are familiar, this is not so difficult to be implemented. Then we trained all our expert and PCM and all our DOA team leader, basically all the certificate directorate. So we trained a lot of persons, and we trained also many colleagues from national aviation authorities. And so far this training received also some good feedback, and I want to put this into the positive outcomes. Then negative one, so these less positive outcomes. We have seen reservation regarding the overall LOI from both sides, from the industry and from EASA. These reservations were mainly based on theoretical evaluation. Start using an old project, trying to implement the new LOI concept. Somebody told us, look, this would have been resulted in an LOI completely different than what we have seen in the past. So we keep this we keep an eye on this reservation, but the practical cases during the advanced application phase did not show this possibility so far. We have seen that for some applicants there is an issue because if they have an IT tool to prepare the certification program, then that system needs to be adjusted or complemented by additional material like a Word file, I don't know. Because there is a new step, the certification program needs to be broken down into CDI, and then for each CDI, the applicant has to make this assessment. So if the applicant has a system which is already defined, already implemented using the current process, of course, this system needs to be adjusted. And there could be, this could generate some additional cost. Unfortunately, on this point, we cannot do anything. More clarity was needed for the LOI proposal. Some applicant during the mass application phase did not realize that the LOI proposal end with a real proposal of elements and activities to be retained by the agency. We have seen that in some cases, applicants believe that once the risk class was determined, the activity was finished. And we clarified that the risk class determination is not the last point of the process. The last point is the proposal of the involvement for each CDI falling into risk class 2, 3, and 4. So this has been corrected to be clearer. And now, and also we have seen that some alleviation for general aviation were missing, so we added some additional alleviation in the MPA. And we realized that the first draft of the guidance was not covering properly the case of derivative or repetitive projects. So also in this case, we added some additional guidance in the MC covering the certification memo, covering the new LOI concept. Regarding general aviation, there is an additional level of flexibility for general aviation. We have a sentence we have introduced a sentence in the MC to allow for this, and also we have tried to simplify the process for simple products. For these simple products, which are all products excluding CS23 commuter, CS25, 27, 29, all the other products can be considered simple. And for these products, we allow that the applicant to consider only 5 of the attachments. So normally the attachments of the certification memorandum are about 17. But for this kind of simple products, we restricted the number of attachments to be considered. I think it was not clear. So the certification memorandum on LOI contains 1 attachment for each EASA panel. So there are about 17 attachments. What we have done for simple products, we have introduced a sentence in the MC to state that for these simple products, the applicant should only focus on 5 of these 17 attachments, which are those affecting some fields which were very important for us, forgetting all the others. So basically, we reduced the amount of guidance material to be considered by an applicant for simple product. And then we are also trying to prepare templates for general aviation with predefined cases. We are working on it. We decided to do it, but we have not yet prepared this one. This template and these practical examples will be introduced in the EASA website. Other information. So the first project, other information from this advanced application phase. So the first project always requires a little bit more effort. It's clear that the applicant has to adjust the procedure and to understand better what we mean with this new concept. But then we have seen that in some cases we have to reduce the risk classes to better meet expectation. One case, for example, was for when we started with the first project, which was on derivative products, and we realized that the risk class determined using the criteria was too high. So for that specific project, we reduced the risk class, but then we added in the guidance the possibility to reduce the risk for derivative projects. We have seen that there is an additional burden, but we tried to reduce it a little as much as possible. We tried to harmonize all the guidance in order to reduce the complexity. we added the guidance where we thought it was necessary. We added a guidance material for the CDI, because the CDI was not described in the initial certification memorandum on LOI. We have seen that in some cases the breakdown of the certification program into CDI was not completed. So the applicant lost some bit of the certification program, and this is something we should prevent. And we had alleviation for derivative project, and we understood that there is a need for training. We trained all our experts, all our PCM and DOA team leader, and we believe that also the industry should train the experts in order to ensure that this new concept is clearly understood. Other initiatives. So we have the advanced application phase in place since October 2016, more than 20 volunteering organizations, more than 100 pilot projects already launched. We trained all our colleagues, and we trained about 90 NAA staff, but we can organize additional training if requested. And then we try to use any opportunity to present the new LOI concept. So we used the opportunity of the DOA certification workshop last year and the year before, this STC workshop also last year. And on top of that, we will organize a roadshow in Europe. Probably there will be 5 sessions out of Cologne and 1 in Cologne. And this roadshow will be launched when we know when the Part 21 is published. During this roadshow, we will go to the industry. The idea is to go through Europe, showing the new concept to the industry. But not only the new LOI concept, we want to show also the other parts, the other bits of the opinion 07/2016, containing the new obligation, containing the new privilege, and so on. So not only focusing on LOI. Now, the specific case of LOI for organization without a DOA. So there are organizations using alternative procedures to DOA, but for this organization, essentially nothing is changing. They have the obligation, they will have the obligation to perform an LOI proposal. And so the process that I already described is valid also for this kind of applications, for this kind of applicant. The only difference, there's only one difference, is that regarding the DOA performance, by default, we will use the level unknown. So the two matrices are simplified into one, and the risk class 1 disappears. But for the rest, all the rest is unchanged, is the same. So basically what I told you since now is true, is valid also for applicants without a DOA, provided that they apply for a new TCE or whatever. We have published an MC focusing on this kind of applications, of this kind of applicants. So we can also accept applicants without a DOA for the advanced application phase. So if any AP to DOA is interested to join this advanced application phase, we have now the possibility to test the guidance, and we will welcome them. No, it's...
No, I just want to say, first, thank you very much, because this was really a journey. And what I liked a lot was the updates, and there is so much that has been done in these last few months. And thanks to the companies, thanks to the proactive attitude of all our industries that was willing to cooperate and to test. So I think it's a great, really great work. And now, before before giving the floor to the two industry, in fact, that you can introduce, I have, of course, a few words on them to welcome them, but also, do you think it's okay if we leave some minutes for a couple of questions, specifically on this second part? Not more than 2 questions, you know, so we capture some of the inputs, and then we move quickly to the 2 presentations. It's okay?
If you have time, yes, I
yeah.
have time.
Okay. Then we will try to, we have many questions, you know, from Slido. So we will try to address 2 of them, and then the others, again, will be captured and properly replied. Okay, Nicolas.
So let's try to be efficient. We have 2 questions about money. Let's make 1 out of it. So from Mr. Thomas Maimanakos, one question is the LOI definition having a direct impact on the STC fee? And from Mr. Philippe Grelot, beyond the current fees and charges regulation, will there be in the next fees and charges regulation a decrease of the fees? Because to his knowledge, the risk analysis being performed by the DOA is some kind of transfer of workload from EASA to the DOA.
Okay, at least there is no direct impact between the new LOI concept and the fees and charge. So these are 2 different subjects. And from one side, I don't see this as a discharge of responsibility, because it's true that the applicant has to make a risk assessment, has to make a proposal, but it's also true that if you open the new Part 21, you will see that the agency has to do the agency has the same obligation. So we have to make our risk assessment. We will start from the risk assessment proposed by the applicant, but we have to ensure that this risk assessment is valid, is acceptable, and I don't see this as a discharge of responsibility. The responsibility, the overall responsibility of the agency and of the applicant are unchanged.
Okay, let's go for another one.
Yeah, for Mr. Mangiarotti, if I'm right. The question is actually that in your presentation, Leonardo, the DOAs who are participating to the advanced phase seems to be quite large and well-established STC houses. So the statistics in the pie charts you have shown, do you believe that they are kind of representative for all DOAs, including small DOAs, who will be then impacted by the new Part 21?
Statistics are made on the project that we received. So it's really what we have in our hands. We cannot make statistics on what we don't have. The idea is that we want to enlarge the advanced application phase to all kind of companies. We don't want to focus only on a certain area of the industry. We are open to any kind of DOAs. So please, if you want to test in your environment, you are welcome to approach the agency, to approach me and my responsible, or through Carla, and we will organize a short WebEx with you. We'll explain again the new concept, and then you can start using the new concept in your projects on a flexible environment. I think it is a good opportunity for you to see how it works. It's free of charge, of course, and I think there could be a benefit. By the way, the 54 projects that we considered are well covering STC holders and the big players. Now, with the fact that some big players decided that any project will be managed with the new LOI concept in place, future statistics can be less representative than the one I presented today, because we have seen that some large manufacturers already decided to move on the new LOI concept. So each and any, and they submit a lot of applications. So the number of applications from these large manufacturers will be more and more relevant, and then the statistic will be a little bit, yeah. But this statistic covers, I would say, quite equally STC holders and large manufacturers for UTC. So.
Okay, Leonardo, thank you very much. I really would like now to go to the two presentations, because this is a new, I would say, format of the STC workshop. We have tried in some presentations to have tandem speakers, not only from the authority, but also from the industry. So, and I am really glad that this integration process happened, particularly for the LOI. So
we have two organizations. Yes. They are they already working in this advanced application phase. We want to thank them. The first is EAD Aerospace, and yes. Actually it's the first time that we meet each other, but we yes. have seen their LOI proposal. And we discussed the proposal received from them in our working group. As I told you, we have a working group where each proposal received during the advanced application is discussed. And although they joined quite late this advanced application process, we have seen that they implemented the new LOI concept in a very good way. So we asked them to present this approach, and we thank them to come. Thank you.
Yes, the next speaker, in fact, is Mr. Seppo from EAD Aerospace. Is the head of design airworthiness director. Welcome. And with more than 20 years of experience in the airworthiness and certification domain. So thank you very much for joining us.
Welcome. Okay, thank you, Carla. Thank you, Leonardo, for the invitation. So I'm pleased to provide you with this feedback we have for applying in our company the new LOI concept. In fact, we are delighted also to have heard that we have been recognized as a well-known established company. In fact, we are a little company, but we have been taking the opportunity to now go to other project, huge project for us, that is the installation of large antennas, and to test what the LOI concept can be and how it can be implemented and be used, and is it acceptable to have this new regulation in a company, in small company point of view. So quickly, what we will do, I will just provide you an overview of how we have considered the implementation of the LOI concept with, let's say, top-level thoughts. We'll go through an example to provide you our feedback, and for sure, at the end, I will provide what was our consideration, if it has been benefiting for us, or if we can have some further indication to EASA, to propose to EASA some other adaptation of the certification memo. So quickly, main principle for us we have written. In fact, we have not defined one level CDI. We have defined what we call a two-level CDI. Why? Because the CDI, as reminded Leonardo, is a kind of gathering of significant element of demonstration. So we have identified that we will go with what we call a top-level area of demonstration that will gather a significant level of element. So, and in fact, we have called that for example, structural assessment, system installation, electrical installation. So we have defined top-level area. Attached to this top-level area, we have associated a panel assignment to the top-level area. So that's what, at the end, provides us a two-level CDI. And also, one other element that we have we have been using is our documentation structure. In fact, we have been defining a simple documentation structure, starting from the certification plan to the definition, what we call the supplement type design, and then we have summary plan that are that give what we will do exactly during the certification process. And after, we have more detailed specific documents, which are the analysis, the certification plan, the test plans, the test reports. And at the end of the certification exercise, again, we go back to a summary report to say what we have done, to explain exactly what we have done in summary. And also we have the last documentation, which are the manual supplement and the compliance checklist. So based on this documentation list, we will provide an assessment of the LOI. As I said, we have implemented, in fact, a structure within the aerospace to be able to substantiate and to install large antennas. So this example today will be based on this typical subject for us, with the installation of a K-band connectivity K-band antenna on an aircraft. Okay, so specificity is that we have conducted more than one project like this. So we have gathered already some experience for early project, for our first project, and we have identified some elements that we'll use during the next project. So that's why here is a summary of our demonstration items, and we have a specific one, which is existing data that we have qualified as a CDI. So these are existing data that we will use for the other project. And the elements that we will, or the complementing demonstration, we have provided other CDI. As I said, CDIs with a level 1, which is the structural assessment. Then we have flight assessment, and we have at the end the documentation CDI. So 4 CDIs that we have been identifying. Then, and you can see on the left side, we define the second level of CDI, meaning that for each CDI we have associated panels. And based on this identification, then we do the risk assessment of these CDIs to make sure that at the end we'll document the risk class as expected by the certification memo and the current GM materials that is provided to see if it is acceptable to work like this. So in this specific, in fact, example, we have gathered, as you can see, for the first CDI, a CDIs with different panel. The first CDI, just to remind, this is the existing data that we will use for demonstration. So in fact, the risk assessment was exactly the same, whatever the panel. So we have gathered that in one line. For the second CDI, it was only associated to the structural panel. So we have based our risk assessment on the structural panel. The same for the third CDI. And the last CDI has been associated to 3 different panels with exactly the same assessment. So the interest in that of having a 2-level CDI is that we can also think of having different risk assessment. For example, I can have the first CDI with a different risk assessment depending on the panel. And at the end, we have a different proposed risk class. So either I can gather, or depending on the availability of data for having a specific risk assessment, then I can ungroup this CDI. Okay, so and once we have made the risk assessment, in fact, we have developed in our certification program for each compliance data to be distributed or to be established. In fact, we have gathered that in a table. You can see on the right side. For each compliance document, we have identified on the column on the right the CDIs with at the end the risk assessment, so that that permit to us to identify which document shall be distributed or not to the authorities. So this is part of our certification program, and again, as we said in the note, in fact, we can also think of having a CDI specific to each panel when a top-level area falls to different panels for the demonstration at the end. So today, what have been the feedback about the experience based on this usage of CDI, of LOI? In fact, yes, the difficulty initially was to define these CDIs, because CDI we have to think of, shall we go to a very specific element, or shall we, as explained Leonardo, shall we say, as we have a project which is not very big project, or shall we go to a single risk assessment? So we have preferred to go to a grouping and to make it interesting to make sure that each expert can have his defined involvement and to decide of its involvement. So that's why we have tried to have a grouping, some kind of smart grouping. And so that demands us some efforts to do that in the ECP writing. By the next step will be for sure to update the organization procedure to make sure that the guideline for defining the CDIs can be adapted and can be adopted by all the team for certification, to make sure that everybody in the company will apply the same way the CDI regulation. And what we have identified, it was also the depending of the DO performance dashboard, because it was an issue for us to understand sometime how the performance was provided by the experts, as it was we didn't have the same feedback on internally than the expert that was provided on previous project. So we have to discuss exactly what was the feedback from the expert to make sure that we properly capture the issues that the expert has been identifying in our performance. So it was. We have discussed that, and as you can have maybe noticed in the presentation, we have identified, in fact, an unknown performance or low performance in the company, because, as I said at the beginning, in fact, we have been implementing the capability of the company to have a structural capability and demonstration capability with a very skilled and very experienced team. So that's why we have assessed this capability during this project, and we started with an unknown performance to make sure that at the end everybody is satisfied of the capability and of the performance of the team that will run such kind of project. So now we have discussed with the EASA. We have demonstrated sufficient experience, and today everybody is in the green, and we are satisfied of that. Advantage of the LOI, in fact, which we have noticed, in fact, it allows the expert to keep them in the loop, what we call keep them in the loop. At the beginning of the project, we agreed with the expert and with the PCM of the involvement. So we record that, and 2 or 3 months later, when we come back with our declaration of compliance, with all the compliance data being there, then the specialist said, I have provided my involvement agreement at the beginning, so I will not come back on that. and it saves us time to make sure that every statement of satisfaction was there timely for the STC issuance. So that is a process today that has been used for 2-3 projects, and the last project that has been issued, the last STC we have received 3 weeks ago, in fact, was very smooth because this involvement was properly and timely managed by the expert and the PCM. So we have identified advantage, in fact, even if it requires for us some efforts at the beginning to identify the CDI. The second point is to say that we have retained a relative decrease of written document. EASA keep looking at the document at the end. It is statistically based, but maybe this is a point that we have to improve by the next steps in the next project. And the last point I would add to that is that we have run this type of assessment based on the project that we know. Time for us to use that on new project to make sure that our approach is acceptable like this and is properly fitted what is the expectation from the Part 21 with the LOI. So that's it for me.
Okay, thank you very much. I would rather ask also the other company to come, and then maybe we'll see how much time we have for some questions, okay? But I appreciated very much your contribution. I don't know if also Leonardo wants to say a few words before moving.
Yeah, no, I think, again, I want to thank you for this presentation, and this presentation shows how a company can decide how to define CDIs. They used a smart way. They separated the documents which were already known by the agency into one CDI, which then resulted in risk class 1, and then there was no involvement on those in this CDI. And the other 3 were isolated because they had some elements of novelty, complexity, which were not already mentioned by the agency. So I think this is a good approach. One approach can be for this project. They can use a different approach for another project. So this is what I want to say. It's a quite smart way for this, and I want to thank you for this presentation. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And so the next speaker is Mr. Michael Wagner from Lufthansa Technik. And he is the project certification manager of the project that is going to describe. Welcome. And he has done, of course, several other projects at Lufthansa and specifically several VIP completions. Cabin completions.
Carla, thank you very much for the introduction. I know it's late. I know that the break is overdue, but I try to make it very short. I was asked to give an overview of how Lufthansa Technik has implemented the LOI concept in a project called Cinderella. Cinderella is an A321 cabin completion project, which has a VIP area in the forward half of the cabin, replacing the airliner seats with individual rooms, stuff like that. And in the aft part of the aircraft, it's more or less a standard aircraft cabin with premium economy class seats. This project was selected as a first trial project from Lufthansa Technik. In total, we have 2. With the second trial project, we have already incorporated some minor adjustments to our concept, but those adjustments are not really affecting this presentation in any way. So the main principal concept is still the same. It's just a question of how documenting LOIs for general substantiation and so on. By the way, we choose a complete different approach, as EAD did. Yeah, let me just start with the presentation. I will tell you where we come from and how we have selected the CDIs. So these are the topics I want just to discuss. Where did we start? How did we define the CDIs? And how we documented the LOIs and the proposal LOIs? And how we did find an agreement with the other specialists in the end? How did the discussions work? So we started with an existing documentation concept, meaning that our engineering departments generate the 21J design documents, description of change, for example, the 145 maintenance documents like installation drawings, installation instructions and stuff like that, and also the 21G documentation, so production drawings, accomplishment instructions and stuff like this. In parallel to the documents the engineering is creating and generating, we have also the certification documents, like for example the compliance checklist and the certification plan and so on. We were thinking about how can we implement this LOI without having a major effect on engineering, because they have a lot of work to do, and we try to keep all these new process and procedures away from our engineering and keep it more or less in the certification department. The next step was a complete confusion. Nobody knew something about risk classes, CDIs, what's that? We started with this project in the end of 2016, where the guidance material was out, but nobody really knew something about it. So what is a performance or what is novelty in the terms of LOI? What are risk classes and a likelihood of an unidentified non-compliance? Hey, what's that? And as I already said, we try to find a way how we can implement it in the existing documentation. After, I would say, reading the guidance material something like 20 times to understand what is in there, we found a concept. The first step was, of course, how can we identify the CDIs, so the compliance demonstration items. We're taking a closer look to our description of change. This is one example of a description of change, just the table of content. And when already looking at the table of content, you can see all the descriptions of change have the same document structure. And when you look at the chapter 3.2 and 3.1 and 3.2, in this case, under the extent of change, you can find different parts which this description of change covers. For example, this is a description for ATA 21, installing cabin air distribution system in the forward part of the cabin, or also galley and lavatory ventilation, stuff like this. So they have already separated the installation of the ATA 21 in different parts. And we thought about, hey, why not just taking those modifications, installations that take place in the aircraft as our CDIs? Muss ich noch näher ran? Louder. Oh. Okay, I try to speak a little bit louder. That's what Nicholas just asked me for. So we defined our CDIs in the same way as the description of change is detailed, and said, okay, we take those descriptive parts, those topics, those headlines of the descriptive part as our CDIs. The problem is, first of all, the advantages. It's always better to start with the advantages. The existing design documentation does not need to be changed, so we can keep our design documentation as it is. The design engineering is more or less not a part of the LOI concept. It's all done by the Office of Airworthiness. It's all done by the certifying staff. So, and the titles of the aforementioned subparts, 3.1 and 3.2, they were also already implemented in our compliance checklist. So the same titles you can see in the description of change, you also find in the compliance checklist again. And in the future, we said, okay, then we can also integrate it in our level of involvement and identify the CDIs. So it's 3 documents in the end, which we come up with, where all the titles are the same and the CDIs have the same titles. So it makes it easier to identify again. The disadvantage. The subject project consists of 27 individual descriptions of change. So for structural modifications, installation of walls, installation of curtains, installation of whatever, air conditioning system, water system, and so on. Even if each DOC on description of change only has 3 modifications mentioned there, you already have 81 CDIs, which is a lot. I was a little bit surprised that 45 projects only had 420 CDIs defined. I have at least 100 in this project, so the other 53 projects only share 320 CDIs, so okay. In the end, we said, okay, the number of CDIs does not really matter as long as we find a way how to document it and how to provide a filter functionality for the individual EASA panels. So with this filter functionality, each EASA panel can just filter the whole bunch of CDIs just to their CDIs. And then it's a lot less work and it looks much better. If it is possible, I would like to show you. It's Excel-based in the end, what we did. And I would later on like to show you the latest, not the final, but the latest version of this Excel file. How the proposed LOIs is documented. So we, as I already said, we have generated an Excel file, which we of course provide as a signed PDF later on. This Excel file we have titled Level of Involvement Table, which is exclusively handled by the Office of Airworthiness. The LOI is Excel-based, as said, to provide to EASA and also to our staff the filter and sorting functionalities. The LOIT, the Level of Involvement Table, contains information about the design, so the reference to the description of change, to the CDI, and to the CDI-related EASA panels, the information about the classification of each CDI, the proposed level of involvement, and also a column for remarks where we can add information about the classification and why we identified this as a risk class 2, risk class 3, whatever, and also put some additional information in there after the discussion with EASA. So for example, EASA specialists request a document just for information. We can put in there, hey, provide this document just for information, just as an example. So the LOIT is used. It uses the same titles for the CDIs, as I already said, as the DOC does, and also as the compliance checklist does. And we have just generated some CDI numbers to identify those CDIs and reuse this CDI number for the LOI later on. So we propose a level of involvement, add a number there, and if during the discussion with EASA additional involvement comes up or request for documents comes up, we can easily add a number and we're done. So this looks terrible, I would say, on the beamer, on the projector. Yeah, it shall just show you the description of change in the upper left part. Then you have this table of contents on the upper right part from this description of change, which I already showed you. The next, the Excel file, this is what is shown in the middle of this page. This is the level of involvement table. So there you can see in the first column, there's this document number, the description of change number mentioned. The second column is the component and system, which is taken from the description of change. And there are some columns in internal definitions, which part of the engineering is involved, so structure, avionics, systems. Then we have the EASA panel that is involved in this modification or for this topic. Then we have this risk classification and the reason for classification and remarks column. And in the end of this document, of this file, you can see the level of involvement proposal of LOI. I hope that everybody can read it. And the first two columns are directly transferred to the compliance checklist or also shown in the compliance checklist, so the component and system and the description of change. And the CDI number is now also documented in the compliance checklist, as well as the LOI number. First of all, our proposal, and later on, when it is agreed, then all the LOI numbers are in there. Can you now open the Excel file? This is the same as, again, I just wanted to show you this because in the presentation it's very small and it's not that good visible. There you can use the filters. Could you, for example, please put a filter on EASA panel 11 and just zoom out a little bit? There you can see these are the CDIs for the complete cabin completion for panel 11. As I said in the beginning, we have something like 100 CDIs identified in total for the complete cabin completion. And this is just panel 11, so I would say it's something like 20, something like that. And so you can, each EASA specialist can filter on his EASA panel number and just sees his or her CDIs that he has to take care about. And there you can also see the risk classification. The advantage of this Excel file is that you can easily change the DOA performance for the panel. You just copy it down. So if they downgrade us to low or whatever, then we can just change it very easily, and the likelihood of the unidentified non-compliance and the risk class adjusts automatically. Okay, can you go back to the presentation, please? That's okay. This is again what I already told you, that the first one, just the explanation for the description of change number and the individual columns, what they are for, what I already told you. After providing the level of involvement table, the compliance checklist, and all the descriptive parts of this project, we thought about, hey, how can we handle it without traveling, what did you say, 17 EASA panels? Something like that, 17 times to EASA, to Cologne, and discuss all the level of involvement and how the concept is set up and everything with each individual panel. So I think we went here once, had covered 3 panels at the same time, and afterwards we did it via telephone conferences, just explaining the complete concept and discussing the level of involvement. They had some disagreement with our classification, so we adjusted the classification during the conference, the telephone conference. They just requested some additional documentation, so we added some LOIs to our table and to our compliance checklist in the end. But all in all, I gotta admit that working with EASA, in this case with the specialists, it was really harmonic, and there was no real bad discussions or something like that. It's a complete different concept as you have seen previously, but it works for us. It's easier for us just to break down the complete modification on the aircraft in small packages and in small modifications, and just to do this risk classification for each and every CDI. It's a little bit more work in the beginning, but in the end, you figure out, or we have figured out, that we have something like, I think, 15 LOIs that we have to provide for the complete cabin completion to EASA. That's it already. Thank you very much, and I think enjoy the break.